Hey guys, tonight we begin in the most glamorous way possible, with your pants down over a cold ceramic bowl in a freezing stone chamber. Wondering how humans ever survived without plumbing? You're sitting on a chamber pot, clutching your cloak, knees trembling from the icy draft that snakes through the windowless walls of your medieval dwelling. The smell is well, medieval, and you're not even sure which is worse, the stench of your own business, or the realization that you now have to carry this sloshing thing across the courtyard to dump it somewhere, hopefully far from your face. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slowly rise from your ceramic throne and glance around the tiny room. There's no water, no soap, no ventilation, a cracked wooden bench, and the regret of last night's stew. That chamber pot, it's not just for emergencies, it's your main toilet. In fact, everyone from peasants to kings had one, and while some were ornately painted or made of pewter, they all had the same grim job. By morning, the pot is often full, if not from you, then from the entire family, sharing your one-room home. You lift it carefully, trying not to spill as you shuffle out the creaky door and into the courtyard. The morning air slaps you awake. If you're lucky, you can dump it into a nearby pit, but more commonly, it gets flung into the street or into the castle moat. Yep, that moat everyone romanticizes as some noble, dragon-repelling feature. It's mostly sewage stew. In cities, people would yell "Gardes," French for "watch out for the water," before tossing waste from upper windows. The warning came too late more often than not. If you weren't splattered, you were slipping in the aftermath. This makes even a simple walk down the lane a game of footwork and fate. Historians still argue whether these waste disposal habits were more prevalent in urban France or England. But one thing's certain, your shoes will never be the same. A fun little fringe fact: some chamber pots were humorously decorated with faces of disliked officials or even devils painted inside. Because what better place to express your opinions than the bottom of a bowl up in? By mid-morning, the streets reek of fermented everything. Chamber pot contents, mixed with horse dung, spoiled food, and the occasional dead animal. And still, this is just normal. Kids play beside drains, vendors set up stalls mere feet from piles of refuse, and everyone pretends they've gone nose. Spoiler, they haven't. You may think, surely the nobles had it better. Not really. Even in castles, bathrooms called garderobes were narrow stone closets perched over open chutes that dumped into the moat. These weren't exactly private or pleasant. The smell often wafted back up, especially on warm days. Guards sometimes stood near them to catch unsuspecting intruders, or to not fall in themselves. And here's a weird twist. People would store their clothes in the gut. Why? Because the strong ammonia from waste was believed to kill lice. So yes, your tunic now smells like a latrine, but it's bug-free. You start to notice just how much effort goes into not stepping in something unspeakable. The roads are unpaved, mud mixes with waste, and carts often splash foul water as they pass. There's no such thing as sanitation infrastructure, no sewer system, just human trial and very messy error. There's one communal cesspit behind a row of homes, but it hasn't been emptied in weeks. A night oil man is supposed to do it, one of the most dreaded jobs in town, but he's either busy or sick, possibly both. You pass a neighbor lugging a bucket with a dead-eyed stare. She's doing her duty, emptying her pot down a slope that leads to the river. That same river where kids swim, women wash laundry, and animals drink. Health code violations. You'd need a whole new language to describe what's going on here. And still, life goes on. People laugh, trade, gossip, mend shoes, and prepare porridge. This is just reality. What do you think of as filth? They think of as routine. It's the great medieval paradox. Even when it stinks, people adapt. They joke about it, tolerate it, and just keep moving. You, however, are still holding your pot. You finally find an overgrown patch behind your cottage and tip the contents carefully. The splash makes your stomach churn. You decide to bury the evidence a little, covering it with dry leaves, as if that helps. A dog trots over and sniffs approvingly. You walk back inside, wondering how your ancestors didn't all just get wiped out from the sheer bacterial warfare they lived in. But hey, they made it. You're here. Your nose, however, may never forgive you. You need to relieve yourself again, blame that thin gruel and mystery ale, but this time, the chamber pot isn't an option. It's full, crusted, and frankly, no longer part of your life plan. So you venture outside, drawn by the promise of a public privy. Sounds formal, almost official. Surely it's better, right? You follow the muddy path behind the alehouse, dodging a group of chickens and a barefoot child, gleefully chasing them with a stick. Eventually, you find it. A rickety wooden structure perched over a slow-moving stream. No sign, no instructions, just a wooden plank with a hole in it. And maybe, if you squint, a spider the size of your fist guarding the corner like it pays rent. You'd step in, trying not to breathe. The floor creaks, the smell hits you like a backhand. And the seto's just a splintery board, wide enough for discomfort but not for dignity. You sit cautiously, hoping the nails hold. Beneath you, the river bubbles gently, or maybe it's hard to tell. Public toilets in medieval towns were rare, gems or hazards, depending on who you ask. They were often built on bridges or piers, the idea being that the river would whisk waste away. But surprise, rivers aren't magic. In summer, they stagnate. In winter, they freeze. And in between, they serve as open-air chemistry experiments. The one you're using. It's part of a communal effort funded by local guilds, mostly because the stench was affecting business. And yes, it's technically an improvement. There's airflow, after all. But the structure is held together with hope and mold. A gust of wind makes it wobble alarmingly. You grip the sides and glance down. Mistake. You're looking into a dark chasm filled with things that may or may not be alive. You feel a pang of nostalgia for your humble chamber pot. Historians still argue whether public latrines were actually common or just idealized in some urban records. What's clear is that maintaining them was a nightmare. Someone had to clean them all, at least pretend to. And when no one did, the whole thing became unusable. People would then go anywhere else. Against walls, in fields, behind churches. Your dignity is optional in the medieval world. Want a weird tidbit? Some medieval latrines had 2 holes side by side so you could chat while you went. That's right, because what's more bonding than synchronized defecation with a friend? You shift on the creaky plank, trying not to fall through history. There's no door, just a curtain that flaps every time someone walks by. A goat bleats nearby. You suspect it's mocking you. The toilet paper situation, still bleak. You find a basket of old rags and a pile of dried corn cobs. That's not a joke. Corn cobs were used. They're reusable, sturdy, and deeply unpleasant. You think long and hard before making your choice. The stream below you burbles again, carrying someone else's contribution downstream. And somewhere downriver, a washerwoman is doing laundry. Suddenly, you're rethinking every romantic notion you ever had about Riverside Village. It's not just the discomfort, it's the sheer vulnerability. Anyone can walk past. There's no privacy, no lock, just a mutual understanding that bodily functions happen, and everyone pretends they don't care. You miss doors, you miss walls. You miss the sweet illusion of solitude. In bigger towns, some inns had attached privies for guests, but if you couldn't afford a room, you weren't using those. And during festivals or fairs, the streets became people went wherever they could. Dallies, corners, empty barrels. Some even used leather toilet flasks hidden under cloaks for emergencies. A few enterprising folks tried to regulate things. City officials in places like London passed laws banning westtossing during daylight hours. Signs warned against fouling the streets, but enforcement was spotty at best. And honestly, how do you police an entire town's bladder? You finish your business and try to stand, praying your knees don't betray you. They creak, the wood creaks, and for a moment, the whole structure feels like it might tip. But you manage. You step out into the sunlight, immediately, 10% wiser and 40% more traumatized. Behind you, someone else enters the privy. You hear a thump, a curse, and then a splash. You don't turn around. You think maybe you'll stick to your chamber pot after all. At least it didn't wobble. At least it didn't involve staring into an abyss filled with centuries of mistakes. But don't get too comfortable. This was the better version of a public toilet. The next one might just be a hole in the market square with a curtain tied to a goat. You've survived the public privy. Barely. Now you're faced with a challenge even more delicate. Cleaning yourself. Except, this is the 14th century, and toilet paper is just a dreamy concept reserved for the far, far future. You're on your own. You glance around. There's no soft supply in sight. No pine-scented wipes, just nature's finest. Rough leaves, dried grass, and a suspiciously coarse rag hanging from a nail. You reach for the least threatening-looking item, a clump of moss. It's damp, comforting. No. Effective. Debatable. Not in the slightest. In some parts of medieval Europe, they used straw or hay. In colder climates, snowballs were the... And if you were particularly... That's why shaking hands with the left was taboo, and still is in some cultures today. You've heard stories of some wealthier households reusing scraps of linen as wipes, washed occasionally. Sometimes, maybe, if the servants remembered. You stare at the rag on the wall again. I wonder how many souls have known its touch. You let it hang in peace. One bizarre solution. A communal sponge on a stick. Ancient Romans started that trend. And let's just say, it overstayed its welcome into the medieval mindset in some places. Shared. Dunked in vinegar. Reused. Suddenly, the moss doesn't seem so bad. Historians still argue whether wiping methods varied drastically by region, or were simply never documented in full. Well, who wanted to write that down? You awkwardly shuffle over to a water barrel outside the cottage, hoping to rinse your hands. There's a small ladle floating in it, used by everyone for drinking. You hesitate. Hygiene standards are basically hope for the best in this era. Then there's the matter of smell. You're not just fighting dirt here. Fighting your own biology in a time where soap is a luxury and perfume is a status symbol. You take a whiff of your sleeve and immediately regret it. Your nose feels betrayed. Your ancestors clearly had a higher tolerance for personal musk. In the countryside, people sometimes used fern leaves or smooth stones from the river, but there's no river nearby, just a muddy ditch and a suspicious-looking puddle that might be alive. You're now fully aware that wiping is not just a mechanical act in this world, it's a gamble. Will it clean you, infect you, or give you a rash that gets worse? Because you don't even have ointment. And here's a truly fringe tidbit. In some medieval bestiaries, those illustrated books of animal knowledge, it's suggested that hedgehogs wiped themselves with fallen apples. Whether anyone took that as inspiration, no one knows. But we pray not. You head back toward your hut, walking gingerly. You feel incomplete, not fully clean, emotionally and spiritually wounded. And this is just the morning. You pass a group of children playing with sticks and mud pies. One picks up a soggy cloth and tosses it like a toy. You pray it's not what you think it is. Then, like a gift from the hygiene gods, you spot a woman drying linens on a line white, fresh, gently flapping in the breeze. You almost cry, but then she scolds you for staring and waves you off with a broom. You realize that people just accept a certain level of grime. Bathing is rare, wiping is primitive, and scent is part of your personality now. But don't worry, no one else smells great either. In fact, everyone smells the same. A bouquet of sweat, old fabric, firewood smoke, and regret. Still, you adapt. You sit back on your rickety stool and take a deep breath. Instant mistake. Back to the moss, it is. You step outside again, this time with no real destination, just a vague hope that some fresh air might rescue your nose and your dignity. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Because the moment you hit the main street, the full force of medieval urban odor hits you like a runaway ox cart. Welcome to the city, where every road is an open sewer, and every breeze carries a surprise. You walk along cobbled paths, though cobbled might be generous. They're more like misshapen stones trying to escape a mud pit, mixed in with horse dung, pig droppings, and last night's ale vomit, a little surprise puddles of human waste. Some historic. It's loud livestock bleating, pots clanging, vendors yelling about their fresh eels, and yet, the only thing louder is the stench. It clings to your clothes, seeps into your skin, and makes your eyes water. A fishmonger waves at you with a hand covered in scales and blood. She offers you a discount. You politely decline, focusing instead on not stepping into a squishy-looking mound someone is pretending isn't there. They've all accepted the terms of life here. Historians still debate just how awful the smell of medieval towns truly was. Some argue that people adapted so thoroughly to it, they barely noticed. Others point to travel journals that describe towns as putrid, offensive, and in one case, a place where noses go to die. You spot an apprentice tossing a bucket of grayish water out his master's doorway. It splashes across the path and narrowly misses a passing priest, who doesn't break stride, just lifts his robe slightly and mutters a prayer. And here's a curious tidbit. Some cities employed rakers to clean the streets once a week, but they were often underpaid, overworked, and utterly ineffective. In London, for example, The law required householders to keep the space in front of their homes clean. Naturally, everyone just shoved their filth slightly further down the road and claimed ignorance. You duck into an alley to avoid a particularly aggressive goose, only to find a small child crouching near a drain, using it as both sandbox and toilet. He grins at you. You grin back, slightly terrified. The houses lean over the street, upper floors so close you could shake hands across them. That's because the lower levels are reserved for shop fronts or storage and the occasional pig. Smells rise and settle between the buildings like soup in a slow cooker. You wonder if this is why medieval perfumes were so strong. To fight a war, no one could win. A woman passes with a basket of herbs, waving them in front of her nose. You assume she's learned how to survive. You follow her example, plucking a handful of mint from a merchant's cart when no one's looking. You reach a corner where 3 alleys meet and, unfortunately, so do their drainage systems. A large, bubbling puddle has formed. No one walks through it. Even the rats go around. You take a wide detour, stepping over a slumped man who may or may not be asleep. You choose not to check. But it's not all doom and fumes. There's laughter too. A juggler draws a small crowd. A group of musicians plays a jolly, slightly off-key tune. Children dart past with sticks and hoops, immune to the funk they were born into. Somehow, life persists. You overhear Tabaka's gossiping about a rival who never cleans his trench. You nod, pretending to understand, and quickly Google the term in your mind. Wooden plates. Because even dishes are meant to be scraped, not washed. At this point, your nose gives up entirely. It retreats into your skull like a defeated turtle. You no longer smell anything. You just are one with the odor. A sentient soup of medieval air. And honestly, you feel oddly proud. You haven't fainted. You haven't slipped. You're learning how to navigate this fragrant maze. But just as you start feeling bold, a passing cart hits a pothole. The splash hits your boots. You look down, then back down. You sigh, back to the barrel. You return home with soggy boots, a numb nose, and a deeper appreciation for windows that actually seal. You sit on the edge of your cart, eyes darting toward a sliver of hope in this bleak world. The bath. You've heard whispers about where people go to wash, chat, flirt, and occasionally catch something they didn't walk in with. Still, the idea of hot water and steam is too tempting to ignore. You set off, winding through streets that still smell like yesterday's soup, and something that would have once been a goat. The bathhouse sits at the edge of town, squat and square, its wooden walls dark with moisture. A faded sign out front shows a half-dressed figure smiling in a tub. You knock, unsure of the protocol. The door creaks open. Steam escapes. You smile for the first time all day. Inside, it's a sensory shock. Warmth wraps around you like a blanket soaked in chamomile tea. Naked or half-dressed figures wander between small steam rooms and wooden tubs. An attendant waves you in, pointing to a bench where you can undress. You hesitate. There's no privacy, just a communal understanding that modesty is optional when everyone smells like week old cheese. Bathhouses were surprisingly common in medieval Europe, especially during the early Middle Ages. They were often run by families or guilds, and ranged from elegant, multi-room establishments to rickety shacks with barely warm water. The hot water was usually heated in massive cauldrons and poured into wooden tubs. Soap, sometimes, more often, it was just water, a bit of scrubgrass, and the vague hope that you'd come out cleaner than you went in. You lower yourself into a half-full tub that someone swears was just emptied. The water is tepid, but it's water. You sigh with relief as it soaks into your grimy skin. Nearby, 2 old men argue about whose knees creak louder, while a young couple flirts with more steam than subtlety. Historians still argue whether bathhouses were mostly places for hygiene or for extracurricular activity. In some cities, they doubled as brothels. In others, they were moral battlegrounds, especially when the church got involved. A fun fringe tidbit: some bathhouses offered food service. That's right. You could eat dinner while soaking. Stew, if you will. You close your eyes and try to relax, pretending you're not floating in shared decisions. Someone sneezes. You sink a little deeper. Then, just when you think you might finally feel clean, a bell rings. The attendant shouts something in middle-high panic and everyone scrambles. Apparently, the town council has issued a temporary closure. Again, the rumor is a visiting friar called Bathhouse's Temptations of the Flesh and demanded they shut down for moral inspection. You groan, standing up slowly, water dripping from your limbs like guilt off a You wrap yourself in a linen cloth that smells faintly of lye and dreams. Outside, the cold wind smacks your damp body with medieval efficiency. Still, you feel better. Not clean, exactly, but slightly less cursed. You return to your hut, cheeks flushed, skin tingling from a half-hour soak, and minor emotional trauma. Back home, your neighbor eyes you suspiciously. Went to the bathhouse, she says, as though you just announced a public sin. You nod. She sniffs dramatically and slams her door. In a few more decades, people will start to believe that bathing is dangerous, that it opens the pores to disease and weakens the spirit. Some will even claim that washing too much is the cause of illness. You're soaking in one of the last golden eras of public bathing before the dark ages get even darker. But, for now, you grab your tunic from the wall, still slightly damp from yesterday's fog, and pull it on. You're not clean. Not really. But you're cleaner than most. And in this town, that's basically royalty. The bathhouse high fades fast. By morning, you're back to reality: sweaty armpits, itchy fabric, and a whiff of something unplaceable, but definitely you. Your tunic clings like a regretful ex. It's laundry day. Or, rather, laundry week. Probably month, if we're being historically accurate. You'd step outside with your bundle of clothes, which smells like it's hosting a flea symposium. Across the village square, smoke curls from a large cauldron behind a laundress's cottage. You trudge over, holding your laundry like it might run away. The laundress doesn't even look up. She just points to a pile marked, "Wait your turn." In medieval times, laundry wasn't a weekly chore, it was a production. Clothes weren't washed often, partly because fabric was precious, and partly because washing was an Olympic sport. Water had to be hauled, fires stoked, soap made from scratch. Forget washing machines, this was medieval chemistry. You'll glance at the soap, a lumpy, grayish substance made from lye and animal fat. It smells like ambition and hoof. It burns your fingers a little, but the laundress says that means it's working. You nod like you understand, though your skin disagrees. Historians still argue whether people in the Middle Ages were truly filthy, or just following a different hygiene rhythm. There's evidence of washing boards in communal river laundries in some regions, but also records of people wearing the same outfit until they disintegrated from guilt. Here's your fringe tidbit. In some towns, laundresses were required to wear identifying aprons, not just because they did the washing, but because many doubled as informants. They knew everyone's stains, literally and metaphorically. You help stir a tunic in the cauldron with a stick that's seen better centuries. Steam rises. Your eyes water. You pretend it's sentimental. Your own clothes are soaking in a wooden tub. The laundress adds more ash soap, muttering about grease demons. You assume she means your socks. Nearby, other villagers swap gossip over linen sheets. The blacksmith's wife is accused of using someone else's drying line. Scandal. A boy gets smacked for wiping his nose on a clean rag. Justice. You learn a trick. After scrubbing, they rinse garments in cold river water, then beat them against flat stones. Not just for cleaning, it's personal therapy. You give it a try. The sound is satisfying. Your hands, less so. Drying is another game. Clothes are hung on bushes, fences, or strung between trees. You watch your undertunic sway like a defeated flag in the breeze. And what about undergarments? Minimal. If you're a peasant, you might have one pair of bries, and you treat them like a treasured heirloom. Changing them is a luxury. Washing them, practically sacred. By midday, your laundry is sort of clean. You wring out your tunic until it resembles a rag, then drape it over a bush, hoping a goat doesn't mistake it for lunch. You head home in your spare outfit, which is just the one you wear while washing the other. It smells like old soup and desperation. But it's technically dry. The sun bakes the village square. Steam rises from the drying linens, mixing with smoke from chimneys and the ever-present scent of dung. You inhale deeply, instantly regret it, and smile anyway. You made it through laundry day. You are now 12% cleaner and 80% more exhausted. You wake up the next morning with straw in your hair, a stiff back, and the faint aroma of yesterday's laundry fire still clinging to your skin. The tunic you washed is dry now. It's wrinkled and smells faintly of lye and smoke, but that's still a step up from the barnyard casserole scent it had before. Time to face the day. But first, your morning routine. In medieval terms, that's a generous phrase. You don't have a mirror, or a sink, or a toothpaste, but you do have a wooden cup of yesterday's water, a handful of crushed sage, and your own determination. You rinse your mouth with the tepid water, trying not to look at the floating bits. Then, with the sage leaves, you scrub your teeth. The taste is bitter. The sensation, sandy, but surprisingly refreshing. If you're lucky enough to have salt, a vinegar rinse comes next. Your gums burn. That's probably a good sign. Or not. Who knows? You reach for a cloth soaked in rosewater left over from a festival months ago. It's stiff, but smells better than you do. You dab it under your arms, across your neck, and bravely old feet. Congrats! You're now 3% floral and 97% effort. Historians still argue whether the average peasant even had a personal hygiene routine. Some records suggest regular grooming, nail trimming, beard combing, even early forms of deodorizing powders. Others point to the abundance of lice combs and nitpicking tools, implying daily life was more about managing pests than polishing appearances. Fringe fact: some people believe that rubbing garlic under the arms would ward off illness or evil. You're not trying it. Not yet. You grab your wooden comb. It's missing 3 teeth and looks like it's been through a tavern brawl. You run it through your hair anyway. It helps You pull out a few knots, 1 twig, and something that might have been alive at some point. Next, clothing. You choose the cleaner tunic, even though it's still a little damp in the armpits. You lace it up, tuck in your belt, and slap your boots against the floor to scare out any spiders. One scurries off. You pretend it was never there. Your undergarments, the same pair. Let's not lie, are doing their best. And as for socks, if you're wealthy, you have woolen hose. If not, you wrap your feet in strips of cloth and hope for the best. Once dressed, you head to your neighbor's house for your face wash. She keeps a shallow bowl of rainwater out front. You splash your face, gasp at the cold, and pat it dry on your sleeve. You hear the village bell toll in the distance. Time for work, but first, a bite. Your breakfast is a chunk of coarse bread, last night's onion soup, and maybe a hard-boiled egg. If the hens were feeling generous, you eat with your fingers, tearing the bread with your teeth, ignoring the grit of ash that somehow found its way in. Again, then it's time to address the pits. Deodorant. Let's not get crazy. You crush a few herbs, lavender. If you're lucky, thyme if you're nuthan, rub them into your skin. It helps for maybe an hour. After that, your natural musk reclaims dominance. But here's the thing, you're not alone. Everyone smells. And in a strange way, there's comfort in the shared chaos of it all. No one expects roses. They just hope you're not the worst. You glance in a bit of polished tin, your version of a mirror. You looked tired, rough, scented vaguely of herbs and coal smoke. But ready. Your medieval morning routine is complete. You're now socially acceptable. Well, mostly. You make your way toward the stone building on the hill, the monastery. You've heard rumors. The monks here are clean, orderly, and terrifyingly quiet. Maybe they've unlocked the secrets of hygiene. Maybe they just don't smell because no one dares sniff. You'd push open the heavy wooden door. Inside, it's cool and dim, lit by shafts of light filtering through narrow windows. The air smells like old books, beeswax, and faint of boiled cabbage. A monk silently gestures for you to follow. You oblige, stepping cautiously on the flagstone floor. Your boots echo in the stillness. You try to walk soft. You fail. Monastic hygiene, it turns out, is a mixed bag. Some orders were very into cleanliness, bathing regularly, washing feet, trimming beards. Others, not so much. It depended on the rule they followed. Benedictines, for example, emphasized both physical and spiritual cleanliness. Not so big on soap. The monk leads you past a cloister garden to a small washroom. There's a long stone basin with spouts, a pile of linen towels, and a bar of lice soap the size of your head. You wash your hands, eyes darting to see if anyone is judging your technique. They are. Silently. Here's your fringe tidbit. Many monasteries had scheduled washing days, hands and face daily, feet weekly, full body on special feast days. Some even built aqueducts to bring in clean water. Monks took hygiene seriously. After all, how can you serve the divine if you're caked in grime? You join the monks for a meal. Everyone eats in silence. The only sound is chewing and the occasional stomach gurgle. You try not to slurp. Your neighbor, a particularly sour-faced friar, glances at your elbow. You lower it from the table. Historians still argue whether these monastic rules were strictly followed or more aspirational than practical. Records show both squeaky clean monks and outbreaks of lice among the tonsured faithful. One thing's for sure, in a world of unwashed, massage the monastery tried. After the meal, you're led to the dormitory. Rows of narrow beds, identical blankets, and no privacy. But the floors are swept, and everything smells faintly of lavender bundles tucked in the rafters. You're impressed and mildly suspicious. You join the monks for evening prayers. Chanting fills the air, calming and eerie at once. You start to feel clean just listening. Then you notice the scratching. A novice next to you discreetly picks at his scalp. You'll glance down and see a flea scuttling across your sleeve. Ah, there it is. You return to your borrowed cot, scratch the back of your neck, and lie down. The straw mattress isn't soft, but it's dry. You feel slightly cleaner, slightly holier, and definitely watched. That night, you dream of soap. You wake before dawn to bells and candlelight. It's time to scrub floors, tend gardens, and copy scripture. But first, hand washing. Again, you look around the dormitory. The monks move with quiet purpose. Not a word exchanged. You wonder what secrets they keep, besides the soap formula. And as you rub your hands clean with cold water and lie, one thing becomes clear. Monks may have been holier, but they still itched like the rest of us. You part ways with the monks after breakfast still itchy, mildly holy, and deeply appreciative of indoor plumbing you'll never see. You head back into town, toward the upper quarters where the wealthy live. You've heard whispers of a noble woman who smells good. Not less bad, actually good. It sounds like sorcery. Her house is tall and timber-framed, with flower boxes on the windows and guards who don't look amused by your muddy shoes. You're let in only after promising not to touch anything. Inside, the air is different. There's a soft sweetness to it, not overpowering. Just a hint of something flowery, maybe. You follow your nose like a medieval bloodhound and meet the lady herself draped in velvet, lounging near an open window, fanning herself lazily. She's not bathing, of course not. That's dangerous. Everyone knows. Opens the pores to illness. But she's surrounded by perfumes, oils, and tiny cloth sachets, stuffed with dried herbs. Her hygiene isn't about washing, it's about masking. She smells like a bouquet with secrets. Wealthy women in medieval Europe had access to imported sense rose water from Damascus, jasmine from India, ambergris from Wales. She offers you a cloth to sniff, and it's like burying your face in a medieval spa. Fringe tidbit. Some perfumes use crushed beetles to get the color just right. Beauty is pain. And sometimes, bugs. You sit carefully on the edge of a stool and watch her dip her fingers into a pot of violet-scented salve. She pats it behind her ears and under her chin, dabbing the hollows of her wrists with practiced grace. You try the same with the scrap she hands you. You instantly smell 30% more expensive and 80% confused. Historians still argue whether medieval perfumes were mostly for masking stench or held symbolic and medical purposes. Some believe scent affected mood, health, even morality. A woman who smelled good was not just attractive, she was virtuous. Probably, maybe, her wardrobe helped. Layers of clean fabric, perfumed gloves, and embroidered handkerchiefs soaked in rosewater. She presses one to her nose occasionally, as if the world outside her parlor is too much to bear. You suddenly relate. She shows you her poem under a small, ornate metal bowl filled with fragrant herbs and spices. She wears it on a chain at her waist. When she walks, it swings gently, trailing scent like a mobile air freshener. You want one? Desperately. Later, she offers you a pastille chew clove and cinnamon, meant to sweeten the breath. You take it, mouth instantly on fire. Nobility has different standards. You glance around and realize something else. While she smells better, her surroundings aren't that much cleaner. Dust still gathers in corners. The chamber pot still waits discreetly behind a curtain. Perfume doesn't remove filth. It just rebrands it. As you take your leave, she hands you a tiny vial of her favorite scent. You nod graciously, trying not to sneeze. It's strong, regal, maybe a little like furniture polish, but in this world, that's practically divine. You step outside, dabbing your wrist with the vial. A passerby actually pauses, sniffing the air with curiosity. Congratulations, you've just unlocked medieval deodorant. Wealth, herbs, and olfactory distraction. You still haven't bathed in a week, but now, you smell like you might have. The perfume clings to your skin like a borrowed identity, but as you shuffle back toward the town square, the sweet floral notes begin to fade, overtaken by something darker. Burnt herbs, panic. Something's wrong. You turn a corner and find a cluster of people gathered around a house marked with a red X. Windows shuttered, a straw bundle burning at the doorstep. The plague has arrived. You stand frozen. The scene is quiet, not silent, but heavy. People whisper. A priest murmurs prayers. A woman clutches a child, eyes darting like a trapped animal's. It's happening. That plague. The Black Death. The one you've only heard about in history books now unfolding in real time. And you're breathing the same air. You try to step away, but there's no direction that feels safe. The town has shifted. Doors slam shut at your approach. Merchants pack up their stalls. A beggar coughs, and the crowd parts like he's on fire. In an alleyway, someone's burning a bundle of rosemary and thyme. The smoke stings your eyes but doesn't cover the deeper stench beneath. Rot, sweat, fear. People believe the plague travels in smells, bad air, or miasma. So they'd light fires, hang herbs, carry flowers under their noses. Historians still argue whether medieval communities understood contagion or just reacted to the visible horror. Some cities imposed quarantine, while others turned to prayer, or worse, blaming outsiders, lepers, or the unlucky. You duck into a shadowed side street and press a perfumed cloth to your face. It helps slightly. You remember the noble woman's pomander, suddenly more than just fashion. A man shuffles past in rags, covered in boils. No one meets his eyes. He collapses near a wall. No one moves to help. You feel sick, unsure whether it's the fear or the air. You overhear two women argue. One says it's divine punishment. The other blames spoiled meat. A monk prays loudly, pacing in circles. A dog barks, then goes silent. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some people believed carrying a dead toad in a pouch around your neck would ward off the plague. Others stuffed onions into their rooms, hoping the bulbs would absorb the sickness. And still, the illness spreads. You spot a group of men digging trenches outside the town walls. Long, shallow pits. One of them coughs into his sleeve. They all look tired. They all keep digging. A vendor still tries to sell dried apples. No one buys. You notice his stall is cleaner than the rest, fresh herbs tied at each corner. Desperate disinfectant. You pass the church. Its doors. A sign outside reads, "No mass. Pray at home." Another man sprinkled vinegar on the stones in front of his home, muttering a charm. You're not sure if it's magic or madness. You reach the outskirts and stop to breathe. The air is fresher here, away from the clustered homes and smoke. But the fear follows. You can feel it clinging to your clothes. You suddenly understand why people wore masks stuffed with herbs, why they lit fires in the street, why no one dares look each other in the eye. The plague doesn't just kill, but it rots trust. It fractures towns. It makes everyone suspect. You rub the vial of perfume still in your pocket, as if scent alone can save you. It can't. But for now, it's all you have. You spot him before he sees you, a silhouette drifting through the smoky alley. Long cloak swaying, wide-brimmed hat low, and that unmistakable bird-like mask. A plague doctor. He looks exactly like the drawings. Leather gloves, cane in hand, masks stuffed with herbs to filter the air. You've seen costumes like this at Halloween parties, but this is no costume. This is survival gear, medieval edition. You duck behind a barrel as he approaches a quarantined house. He knocks once, waits, then enters without hesitation. You edge closer, curiosity outweighing good sense. The beak of the mask is filled with strong smellings, cloves, myrrh, dried roses meant to ward off the miasma. The belief is simple. If the air smells sweet, it must be safe. So the doctor is basically walking around with a nose garden. Historians still debate how much plague doctors actually helped. Some treated patients. Some kept records. Some, well, just looked the part and prayed they wouldn't die. Few succeeded. Fringe fact, some plague doctors wore red-tinted eye lenses in their masks, believing the color would protect them from disease. Spoiler, it didn't. You watch him emerge from the house, his cane tapping the ground. He uses it to inspect patients from a distance to lift blankets, point, even prod bodies. No touch. Never touch. He heads toward the next house, where a woman cries out from an upstairs window. Please. She begs, clutching a limp figure. He says nothing, just gestures for her to stay inside. He marks the door with a red slash and moves on. The role is simple. Triage the dying, comfort the living, if there's time, and above all, avoid becoming the next corpse. You follow him for a few blocks, staying well back. He speaks to no one. People part like water around him. He is fear made visible. At one point, he stops beside a burning barrel. He reaches into a pouch and tosses in a handful of herbs, bay leaves, and rue. You think. The flames spit and crackle. Smoke rises in a fragrant plume, a temporary shield. You wonder if he believes it works, or if it's just something to do while the world ends slowly around him. Eventually, he enters a home and doesn't come back out. You stand across the street, staring at the door. Minutes pass, then hours. You never see him again. You return to your hut that night, shaken. The wind howls through the shutters. You sprinkled the last of your rosewater on your tunic and hang the perfumed cloth by your bed. It doesn't feel like protection, but it smells like hope. And tonight, that's enough. You barely sleep. Every creak outside, every cough in the distance, tightens your chest. But when the sun finally rises, you drag yourself from bed and head deeper into the heart of the town's decay. It's the poorer district. Now the slums. The crumbling tenements where the air feels thicker and the alleys grow narrower. These weren't in the tourist brochures. You squeeze between leaning timber buildings, walls bowed like tired shoulders, laundry lines sagging with rags and despair. The smell hits first. Rancid meat, mildew, and something metallic beneath it all. Then the sound, the squeaking, the scratching, the unmistakable pitter-patter of tiny vermin feet. Rats. You spot one darting across the road, tail like a rope, beady eyes gleaming. Then another, then 5. A whole furry fleet vanishes into a broken wall. You step back instinctively, but it's no use. They're everywhere. These are not cartoon rats. These are floridled disease carriers. You watch them with a new kind of respect and fear. Historians still argue how central rats and their fleas were in spreading the plague. Some blame them entirely, while others point to poor sanitation and human-to-human transmission. Either way, you do not want to make friends. Fringe tidbit. In some towns, people blamed cats for spreading the plague and killed them, and ironically worsening the problem by letting rat populations explode. Nature. 1. Humans. 0. You duck into a dilapidated tenement to escape the swarm. The stairwell groans as you climb. Inside, the air is damp, the wood soft with rot. Families huddle in corners, sharing blankets, food, and fleas. A baby cries. An old woman mutters to herself, staring at the wall. You notice a pot of stew bubbling over a small hearth. It smells like onions, hope, and something suspiciously rodent-like. No one looks well, but no one has the strength to look worse. You sit on a step and try not to touch anything. A man nearby scratches vigorously, sighs, and starts over. He doesn't even seem embarrassed. It's just part of life here. There's no plumbing, no trash removal, no fresh air. Buckets overflow. Mold paints the walls, yet still, people endure. Children play with broken bits of pottery. A woman combs lice from her daughter's hair, singing softly. And the rat, they move like they own the place. You see them watching from rafters, slipping between floorboards. You suspect they do own the place. Suddenly, a loud crack upstairs. A floorboard collapses. Dust and debris fall. No one screams, they just shuffle a little farther from the danger zone. It's not the first time. It won't be the last. You find a small window and peer outside. The courtyard is overgrown and littered with bones. Yes, actual bones. You can't tell if they were meant to be buried or just left. A dog noses through a pile, wagging its tail. You make your way back down, stepping carefully. At the door, you see a girl sitting cross-legged, petting a rat. She's even named it Peppa, she says. He doesn't bite. He's nice. You nod, smile, step away. Outside again, the light seems too bright, the air too dry. You realize you were holding your breath the whole time. You look back at the building. It leans a little more than it should, as if the entire structure is tired of being alive. You walk away slowly, perfume faded, heart heavy. The slums have a way of reminding you that dirt isn't just something on the surface. Sometimes it's built into the walls. You walk for what feels like miles just to clear your head. The wind carries the smell of roasting chestnuts, and also something dead. Hard to tell which is stronger. You duck into a quieter alley and find yourself near a Gila Stola, makeshift setup of crates, bundles of dried herbs, and a man with a feathered cap who clearly hasn't slept since the Crusades. He greets you with a nod and a cheerful, "Feeling unbalanced today?" You shrugged. He points to 4 jars on the table labeled blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Yep, it's humus time. In medieval Europe, The human body was believed to be ruled by these four fluids, too much or too little of any one, and bemure, ill, or angry, or melancholic. The cure, adjust the balance, preferably by poking holes in you. Historians still argue whether this theory was believed by all, or just by doctors trying to explain why everyone was always sick. Either way, it dominated medicine for centuries, and provided a handy excuse for whatever ailed you. Too much black bile, the healer mutters, peering at your skin. Definitely melancholia. He offers a pouch of dried nettles and something that smells like wet hay. Steep it in goat's milk, he says, or cat's urine, if you're fancy. You take it, politely. Nearby, a boy groans on a cart while a barber surgeon sharpens his knife. No anesthetic, just grit, and possibly strong wine. The boy's leg is wrapped in linen stained brown and black. The surgeon glances up at you, grunts, and turns back to his patient. You back away. Fringe tidbit. Some medieval doctors believed illness could be cured by pressing a pigeon to the patient's belly. The pigeon often didn't survive. Neither did the patient. You pass a group of women kneeling by a shrine, praying feverishly to Saint Sebastian. He's the go-to guy for plague protection arrow wounds and all. You wonder how many candles he gets per day. Another healer waves you over. She's older, cloaked in layers of scarves and mystery. Try leeches, she says. Balanced my humors right out. You decline. You're handed a vinegar-soaked cloth to clear the head. It stings your eyes and smells like salad gone wrong, but you keep it. Everything smells like something else these days. You tuck it under your hat. Suddenly, a merchant stumbles past, coughing violently. People scatter like mice. He collapses in the dust. No one goes to help. A priest walks by, muttering blessings and sprinkling water from a cracked flask. This is what medical care looks like now: superstition, guesswork, and a lot of dried plants. Some swear by garlic amulets. Others bury coins soaked in holy water. One man walks around with a dead frog tied to his ankle to draw out the poison. You try not to stare, and yet some of it might help. The herbs, the vinegar, the prayers, they may not cure, but they comfort. And in a world like this, that's worth something. You tuck your pouch of mystery nettles into your belt and walk away. Still dirty, still itchy, but slightly more balanced. You need a break, maybe even a fantasy. So you do what anyone would do in your situation. You sneak into a castle. All right, maybe not sneak. More like you tag along with a cart of firewood, keep your head down, and act like you absolutely belong here with your soot-covered tunic and plague-soaked vibes. The guards barely glance at you. They've got bigger problems, namely keeping the rich alive while the poor die outside the gates. Inside, everything changes. The floors are cleaner. Not clean, but less damp. The torches are placed neatly in iron sconces. The air still smells like humanity, but it's a scented version smoke from exotic woods. Burnt resin, and something faintly lemony drifting through the halls. You duck into a side room, what looks like a dressing chamber, and you find it. The illusion of hygiene. Padded benches, carved chests, embroidered towels, and tables covered in perfumes, oils, powders, and tiny glass vials with labels in Latin. Not by scrubbing it off, but by layering over it. A servant walks in, carrying a tray of gloves. Not food. The lady of the castle apparently changes them several times a day, not because they're dirty, but because they've absorbed too much perfume and need to breathe. You quietly vow to never complain about doing laundry again. Historians still argue how clean medieval nobles really were. Some reports claim queens bathed only once a year. Others describe elaborate bathing rituals with milk and flower petals. The truth likely lies in between: less frequent bathing, more focus on appearance, scent, and show. Fringe tidbit. Some noble women wore apple-scented gloves soaked in perfume oil, then carried a pomander or a scented cloth in the other hand just in case the gloves weren't enough. You're startled by a soft cough behind you. A young nobleman steps in, clearly dressed for an audience. Velvet doublet, lace collar, hair brushed and glistening with rose oil. He nods at you, then picks up a pot of powder and dabs it under his arms like it's war paint. He catches your expression and smirks. "We smell good," he says dryly. "Doesn't mean we are." You laugh, then covered your mouth. Suddenly, you smell like yesterday's fear and someone else's soup. He offers you a dab of lemon balm paste. You take it, rub it on your wrist, and marvel at how something so small can feel like armor. Then he hands you a sachet, small embroidered pouch filled with lavender and mint. "Put this in your under tunic," he says. The nose lies more easily than the eyes. It's absurd, but you tuck it into your belt like a treasure. You're not fooled, of course. You saw the same chamber pot behind a curtain. You know these walls hide the same bodily functions, the same fleas, the same struggle. But here, everything is gilded, cloaked in fabric, in wealth, in scent. You leave the room, walking through corridors that echo with hushed conversation and the rustle of silk. You're a ghost here, but an observant one. The nobles may not be cleaner, but they've convinced themselves and everyone else that they deserve to smell better. It's late now. The sun's gone, but the air still hangs heavy with a scent of ash, fear, and faint lavender from your noble souvenir. You've seen the city from every angle of the chamber pots, the slums, the perfumed castles. But tonight, your journey's not over. Tonight, you walk into the darkest part of the medieval world. The job no one wants, but someone has to do. You're a knight's oil man now. The title sounds almost noble until you realize it means hauling human waste by the bucket under cover of darkness. When the world sleeps, you trudge through the alleys with a cart and a stick and a pair of boots you'd rather burn than clean. You start near the buckets wait outside doors. Some covered, some not. You lift one, and the contents slosh like regret. You hold your breath. Doesn't help. The smell punches through your soul. People pay you in scraps bread, pennies, favors. It's not about money. It's about survival. Someone has to carry the waste out of town and dump it in the pits beyond the walls. If you don't, the streets flood with filth. Again, you load one bucket, then another. A rat watches you work, sitting like it's on break. You nod respectfully. The rat doesn't blink. Historians still argue how organized waste removal truly was. Some cities had systems in place, others left it to volunteers. Either way, it was dangerous, disgusting, and deadly. Falling into a cesspit was a real occupational hazard. And here's your fringe tidbit. In some places, people believed the gases from waste pits could cause spontaneous death. No spirits, no curses, just pure, raw methane. You walk a little slower near the big ones. You slip once, not all the way in, but enough to change your life. You clean your boot with straw, swear quietly, and keep going. Hours pass. You're alone with the sounds of dripping, creaking carts, and the occasional far-off scream. The city's asleep. You're awake with its secrets. You reach the outer pits by moonlight. They stink like the end of the world. You dump the final bucket and step back quickly. It steams in the cold. You sit for a moment, looking at your hands. They're raw. Your clothes are ruined. But for the first time today, you're alone. No crowds, no judgment, just you and the stars. You wonder how long this job has existed. How many nameless souls have carried this burden so others didn't have to. You won't be remembered, but the streets will be slightly safer because of you. You start a long walk back, pulling the now empty cart behind you. And despite everything, the filth, the smell, the cold, there's something peaceful about it. You are the quiet hero of the gutter, unseen, unscented.